For the first time in 8 weeks, initial jobless claims rose above 800,000. 853,000 is where they were recorded last week, to be precise. That was well above economists' estimates for 725,000. Let's talk more about this and the overall labor picture right now. Elizabeth Crofoot is joining us. She is senior labor markets economist at the Conference Board. Elizabeth, thanks for being here. So you have been looking for a potential continuation of the rising trend here, and that number coming in well above what was expected. There's been some talk that perhaps the Thanksgiving holiday sort of threw things off or skewed things. How much is that a factor, and how much is it just a factor that there are more people still out of work?
There was definitely an issue last week with Thanksgiving, right? Some technicalities and the seasonal adjustment. But for the most part, this is a function of the fact that the pandemic is arguably at its worst phase that we have seen. And consumers are hesitant to transact in the economy for fear of getting infected by the virus. And that's really translating into businesses, right? They're also operating at reduced capacity because of additional restrictions. So that's translating into reduced demand. And when you have that as a business, you have no option rather than to shed jobs, especially with some restaurants, for example, that can no longer operate outdoors. They have to reduce their employment levels, and that's only going to get worse in the coming months.
And Elizabeth, when we think about initial claims as a data set, we have the initial claims, we also have the continuing claims, and you're thinking about it as an economist. How useful is it, and how closely are you watching that now as things have sort of leveled out, unfortunately, at this ridiculously high level of initial claims? We've got 3.5–4 million people on continuing claims, and we go back in time to March and April, and then numbers were mind-boggling. It was like, this is the most important indicator. Is it still for you, or are there other things that you're watching more closely at this point in the recession?
Yeah, I mean, really, these numbers have been mired by backlogs and systems, right? Outdated systems by many of the states, and also a lot of fraud. So, and even a recent GAO report came out recently that really questioned some of the reliability of these numbers. So, definitely, as a labor economist, we look at other measures as well, including the unemployment rate. But really, the labor force participation rate is key right now because the headline unemployment rates are really masking a lot of the fact that many people, especially women and minorities, are leaving the labor market. Women, especially with the childcare crisis, right? There are many children at home right now learning online. Women disproportionately bear that burden of staying home with the kids and making sure they're continuing their online education. And when it comes to, some of minorities who are more likely to be employed in service sector jobs that really have that face-to-face component, right? So there are questions about, should I go back to work? Should I look for a job in that sector that's going to put me at risk? So many people have decided not to look for a job and, really cutting back out of the labor force right now.
Based on the data you look at, how severe is the economic slowdown unfolding right now?
Right. Well, we did see a record economic contraction in the second quarter, followed by a rebound in the third quarter. But we're expecting a softening of economic growth going into the fourth quarter as we're seeing that job gains have really started to slow down. We saw the report come out last week from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on the November jobs. That was also very disappointing, only 245,000, where we were seeing, 500,000, over 1 million jobs being added consistently since since the recovery from the pandemic started. And so with that crawling pace now, we actually now have a possibility of seeing a contraction in employment in December. We're now seeing these initial job claims that are really jumping because of the stage of the pandemic that we're in. So that's really going to, decelerate the improvement in the labor market, also in consumption, which is going to drag on economic growth in the fourth quarter and into the first quarter of 2021.
Elizabeth, if you could talk to me a little bit about job openings data, because we got the October job openings earlier in the week, and they were over 6.6 million. So do we still have a mismatch problem for the people who are out of work right now?
There's definitely a disconnect in the labor market right now in terms of the unemployment rate and the number of jobs that are available, right? Because there's still actually more slack in the labor market. There's many unemployed people, but there, in terms of the job openings, there's still many available jobs, but people aren't looking for their jobs, right? They're not actively out there looking for jobs because of the pandemic. They're afraid of getting infected because of the childcare issues. So these are all issues that are really constraining the labor supply right now. And in some cases, businesses are having a hard time hiring workers, even if they need them, because of that challenge where the pandemic puts individuals at risk.